Well, hello everyone. Good morning for some of you, good afternoon or good evening. Depends on where you are in the world. For me, it's like 7:30 in the morning. I think for Rafael, it's a similar time. So welcome to publications of the International Association for Political Science Students. Meet the editorial teams. I think this is a very interesting space that we have to talk about our journal and about the challenges and also about all the success that it has had. So this is like to introduce and provide insights into the three publications of IAPSS that are at the forefront of receiving, evaluating, and publishing research and insights in political science and neighboring disciplines from students, junior scholars, and occasionally also established academics from all over the world. And I think this is a very positive thing that we are having a very big reach around the world. So this is great. So I will suggest that the person who's talking is the only one who has the microphone activated, and then the rest of us could be on mute. And then I have a proposal for the order of people speaking. We will begin with Miss Melis, then with Julia, then me and Rafael would follow, and followed by Nzube, and lastly Andresa and Max. So maybe we can begin with Melis and her insights about this interesting topic. I'll leave you the floor, Melis.
Thank you very much, Anna. Well, the panel is called as Meet the Editorial Board, but I'm not from the editorial boards. I have published with both of our journal as well as a different view blog, but at the same time, I'm the Vice President for Academic Affairs at IAPSS. So I am in charge of reviewing these publications and also helping with their management when it's required. So I will briefly mention you this other more management perspective of things about the ADV and ELA, and afterwards I will leave the floor to Politikon and the editors of Politikon to explain how things are working in a more closed-up perspective in Politikon. As for ELA, so I will go first with ELA and then to ADV, and it will be quite nice if you had any questions on that to raise after the discussion as well, because there's quite some improvement that we are planning to do there, and it will be really great to have some insights from your side as well. So first of all, let's start with the ELA, the Encontro Latinoamericano Journal of IAPSS. It focuses on Latin America, as you can say from the name, and it's specifically focuses on the Latin American politics, and that is why we publish in three different languages there, in Portuguese, in English, and in Spanish. So this is a quite specific region-focused and quite diverse journal. We have 4 editors. One of them is the editor-in-chief, the deputy editor-in-chief, the managing editor, and the deputy managing editor in ELA. And apart from that, we have a double-blind review system. We publish research articles, research notes, as well as book reviews. And when it comes to the current affairs of the journal, so we've been coming across some small problems, as given that this is a student journal. We have problems in the cases in which the students could not attend, and we had to change the editor-in-chief. So currently we are in the transition process for the editor-in-chief, but this is like a general thing that happens in the student journals. So we are trying to promote our papers much better than it used to be, and trying to reach out to more regional networks within Latin America to ensure that we receive good quality papers and also deliver a quite nicely written journal issue. At the same time, we recently recruited a graphic designer. So the improvement of the journal is in process, but there is still a lot of work to be done. So I'm very much looking forward to the discussion on this in case that you have some more insight about Latin America in specific. And moving on to ADV, a different view blog. So in the past, I will just give you a brief historical analysis of what happened in the past with a different view blog and how it's functioning right now. So when we first start with a different view blog, which is a scientific student-led blog, it was the case that we did not have this review process of papers. We only had an editorial board who would write the papers. It was essentially an authorial board who wrote their papers for the blog. But then we move on to a different process last year. Once I took over the academic department, and then we start doing this paper submission, but shorter paper submission process for the different view blog. And right now we are actually publishing 750 to 1,500 words commentaries on recent issues, as well as on the recent developments on political science. So we are also there doing a double-blind peer review process with our 4 editors, one of them being the editor-in-chief and the other 3 of them being editors. And we are publishing in the fields of political theory, foreign policy, in IR, in the recent issues that are happening in the world that are more specific to the current affairs. And apart from that, we are publishing research articles, book reviews, rebuttals, opinion pieces that are very, very diverse in their field. But we are, again, coming across similar issues with the submissions as well as the promotion of this publications. So that's another topic that I will very much like to point out in the later discussion. And also, I think what is really important, and my colleagues from Politikon would also probably point out to this particular issue, that when it comes to student publications, what really motivates the students to do this kind of a volunteering work is that when we receive good quality papers, when we are engaging with very high level research from students who are in our levels, I think that really motivates editors as well as the people who are involved in this process to do better work. So I think there is so much work to be done in the future when we move on to better promotion of these journals, of this blog, and hopefully improve our publications together. Should we move on to questions right away or at the end?
I think we can all participate and then receive a round of questions at the end. What do you think?
Surely, but if there are any urgent burning questions, feel free to shoot them.
Well, thank you, Melis. So maybe we can listen now to Julia Jacques and her experience.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, my name is Julia Jacques, and so I've been with IAPSS for about 2 years in a couple of different capacities. So I first joined actually as part of a member of the PR department. So I was helping public relations with media coordinating and helping contribute and manage the Facebook profiles, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Reddit accounts. And when I joined as an editorial assistant a little while later, not too much later, there was actually a lot of overlap in the necessity and trying to boost exposure and publicity for different articles published like through Politikon and Encuentro Latinoamericano. And I'm actually no longer with the PR department at the moment, but it was a really wonderful experience. And particularly because they have a community of about 200,000 followers, it's an extremely valuable tool to give exposure to these rising authors. And a lot of them are quite young. The quality of research is really high. But Politikon and actually both the journals offered through IAPSS offer kind of a very nice platform and opportunity that might actually really give rising researchers and analysts and junior scholars, current students, master students, postdocs, a lot of them are trying to get further into their careers, but there's a lot of barriers to this, or a lot of fees associated with publication, or all sorts of things. But IAPSS is actually, it's growing in terms of the number of journals that it's indexed in. I think this year we've got it was a huge leap. Actually, Politikon is now indexed in like the directory of open access journals, IAPSS, I think International Political Science Abstracts, and JGate, and there might be others that I'm missing, but yeah, it's been a big year. And also in terms of quality, it allows the size of the team as well as the success of the journal allows for the pieces to be more selective and really, really fine-tuned and focused. And as far as editing, I'm more, as an editorial assistant, I'm not as in-depthly involved as, Max or Melis or Andresa. You guys are on the front lines there. But a lot of what I've been doing has been just sort of previewing and kind of saying, yes, like this one can go further down the line, or no, maybe this one needs some revisions, or this one's good, but these are the areas that need to be focused in on as it continues. And these kind of more generalistic things. And in my other job as well, I do a lot more fine-tuned editing, so it's very compatible with my other work and research and whatnot. And one last thing that I wanted to, well, not one last thing, but one major thing I wanted to point out are Politikon is actually kind of a vehicle to other events as well that are very IAPSS focused, but also getting further down the rabbit hole of empirical research itself. Like, for example, a few years ago, I think about 2 years ago, they partnered with the Federica Learning Center to produce like a massive online open course series that offered 5 different courses that could really help people and students and researchers kind of get a stronger foothold on how to design their own research studies and to do so in a very quality way. And it was a phenomenal course, I think. And there was another event as well. I think there was in Capri. I'm not sure if this went through with the pandemic or not, but in either case, these kind of collaborative, instructive, like skill building events and also like seminar styled sessions that really help boost the foundation for researchers are very available through Politikon. It's not just a publishing opportunity. You can also access these other things that help you hone your skill, and it's good. It's really good. It means the authors aren't just cut loose. They have a way to improve either if they have published or if they're seeking to. And in terms of the spectrum of the content, this was also another thing that I found really impressive with IAPSS is that, or with Politikon, after reviewing a number of different articles that have come in over the time that I've been volunteering, is that the content comes from all over. It's not heavily weighted towards one side or another. It's one of the few apolitical journals out there. I feel like it's kind of a rare thing these days to find something like that. And it's widely inclusive as well. So as long as the quality is there, then all are welcome. So it's been a phenomenal experience. And I'll leave it there. I do have to go kind of soon, so I apologize for my early absence, but I'll leave the floor to the next person so that I can at least hear a couple of other people as well. But thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Julia. And well, I know that all of you have so many things to do. So thank you for joining us and for sharing your experience. And I hope to see you soon. So we have next a joint presentation by Rafael and me. Let me congratulate Rafael for his new position as co-editor along with Jasleen. I know that both of you will do an amazing job. So I will share my screen as I can begin. I will check my own time, I promise. Okay. Please let me know if you can see.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is IAPSS Politikon, which is a junior academic journal for the 21st century. So Politikon is our flagship journal of IAPSS. I've been, as working as an editor with Politikon for probably 4 or 5 years. I recently had to leave my position given to my new duties as Congresswoman. My time is a little bit limited, but it has been a great experience. I learned a lot. And I'm sure I also helped other people to develop high quality research. Why publish with us? I believe that the journal is a great option for junior scholars who are looking for options that are actually good, that actually helps them improve their research, and that it gives them actually prestige, which is something that we found out in a recent investigation that we are doing. We are investigating how publishing with Politikon has helped the careers of young scholars, and it has been really great results. So it has been published since 2001 by a global association of students and junior scholars. This is something very positive. I think that it attracts submissions from all over the world. We have people from Asia, from Africa, from Latin America, from North America, even Central America. And I believe that this is good, and it talks and it speaks highly on the reach that Politikon has had. Also, it enables international conversation and interaction. We have partnerships with senior scholarly organizations that are very famous, such as IPSA and IAPSS and others. And some of our representatives serve on the advisory committee of the journal as well, some of their representatives. Our editorial board is composed by students and junior scholars, undergraduates and postdocs. In my case, I began when I was PhD, and then I continued while my postdoc. The peer review process is a very strict one. We look for reviewers who are specialists on those different topics, and we worry for them to give us some valuable feedback so that the researchers can actually reach a high standard. So these reviewers are from more than 40 countries and 180 universities. Our Politikon also encourages interdisciplinarity, given that yes, our focus is political science. However, we also accept from other areas related, such as international relations, sociology, and others. And that is also very good because it is inclusive. I will leave some of these statistics to Matt, and I will move on to the next topic. He is the specialist in this. So why do authors want to get published? One of the main objectives of people wanting to be published is because they want to share their findings or their interpretations with the world. When you get published, you want to, for example, you do science and you write about it, you do experimental designs, and then you have some results that need to be shared with the world. And I've learned so much from this process of publications, because I read so many articles, good ones about so many different topics, that it actually makes me happy to see that we actually were the first journal for some people, and this is very, very motivating. Authors also want to get published in order to increase their chances to be accepted into further studies, to get an academic job, to gain access to further professional opportunities. In our area of academia, publishing is very important, and it gives you, for example, prestige, and to say that, yeah, this scholar has published in this journal and has published about this topic. And so it increases actually the possibilities for you to get into a higher degree, or even to get a job we all know that in order to get a position as a professor, you should have a number of publications, because it speaks on your compromise, your commitment to knowledge. You also gain more experience with academic publish, and also to receive feedback of their work, because sometimes, even though if we get rejected, we also get these comments that are very valuable for our research. So about Politikon, we have research papers, we have research notes, review essays, and book reviews, so that there is this wide range of formats that gives authors many options that allow them to be heard, to be read, and to be shared. Usually, once you get published, the authors they share their publications with social media, for example, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, which gives actually this research a higher reach in the world. It depends on where they are in the world, but it actually disseminates all this knowledge. It is open access, and I think this is one of the most positive things, because it is very hard to find an open access journal that gives you no paywall, no subscription model, and that actually has access to everyone. I strongly believe that everyone around the world has the right to get access to knowledge. Being from El Salvador, I had the difficulty in my university that didn't have access to some famous journals, for example, and so most of us get access through our institutions, through our universities, but when we don't have that option, it becomes very difficult for us because we have to pay for knowledge. So I believe that open access is a really great option, and it increases the dissemination of citation possibilities. We also have a commitment to dissemination, as I said before, through social media. We also have the IAPSS newsletter, and it can also include the ORCID, which is now very highly required. There is also a commitment to advancing discussion on the role of junior scholars in academia. We have political webinars that whose objective is this, actually. We also had a session, actually, yesterday in this same Congress, which was about the role of students and junior scholars in academic publishing. No, that was before. Or students, by students, for students or beyond. It was actually very, very productive, and we shared a lot of experiences on our the success of Politikon. So I will leave now the floor to Rafael so that he can continue to talk about our topic, and thank you. Welcome, Max. Rafael.
Thank you, Ana. Hello, my name is Rafael Blancarte. I am the current Deputy Editor-in-Chief of IAPSS Politikon. I would like to talk on my experience on this journal after this initial round of presentations. So let's continue with the presentation. Okay, I'm going to share. Okay, could you see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Now, all right. Well, let's continue by stating the following question: why submit to Politikon? Well, first of all, in terms of quality, both the articles that are published and the editorial process follow strict standards, and it is necessary to mention that all published articles have a unique digital object identifier, just like any other quality scientific journal. At the same time, Politikon is currently indexed in IPSS abstracts, RE+, DOAJ, and JGate. it is expected that in the future, the journal will be indexed in more systems. Regarding accessibility, we offered unique promotional opportunities through the IAPSS social networks. We are aware that researchers want the product of the research to be disseminated as widely as possible. So each published volume of Politikon is promoted through the IAPSS social networks, as well as through the newsletter that IAPSS sends to all its members. Conversely, Politikon has a commitment to open knowledge, as Anna stated, and to the broad dissemination of scientific research. So it is part of the open journal system and is an open access publication. In terms of the experience gained by authors who submit papers to this journal, it is necessary to mention that regardless of whether the manuscript is published or not, the editorial team is committed to ensuring a review process that it is useful to the author, so that improves the methodological and theoretical structure of each paper. And this is achieved largely thanks to the triple blind peer review process. These are some of the reasons that we consider Politikon attractive to potential authors. It may also be attractive for potential authors to know that since 2019, the Best Article Award has been launched in recognition of the best article published each year. In addition, each edition is launched in honor of a renowned political scientist. Last year's award honored Leonardo Morlino. Additionally, the first edition of the Best Reviewer Award is under development. This award seeks to recognize the best reviewer in our portfolio of reviewers each year. Then we not only recognize the best article published, but also the best reviewer. All right, how to publish with Politikon? Well, first of all, we suggest to reviewing the submission guidelines that can be found on the Politikon website. Secondly, it should be mentioned that every paper undergoes a standard review process that involves multiple round peer reviews, and that authors must pay attention to the revisions so that their manuscript can advance through the stages of the editorial process. It is also worth mentioning that the possible outcomes of the whole process can be published with major revisions, published with minor revisions, revise and resubmit, or reject. All submissions comply with the requirements, must comply with requirements that appear on this slide and are intended to guarantee the originality of the manuscripts submitted. Therefore, papers that are considered for review must not have been published completely or in part elsewhere, and any conflict of interest must be disclosed. All right, currently, Politikon receives manuscripts whose format is not Chicago, that is the format we use in this journal. However, in case the papers are considered to fit for advancement, that means with a result of revise and resubmit or higher, then the paper will have to be reformatted according to the Chicago style. All reviewers receive an evaluation format from which they must carry out their work. This format contains the following elements, which, as you can see, address both substantive and formatting dimensions. In addition, reviewers are expected to include their comments on the paper if necessary. Politikon is a journal committed with new generations of political scientists. So regardless of where they come from, also regardless of the outcome of the review process, we seek to ensure that authors get a meaningful experience. There are journals that do not explain why a paper has been rejected, and at Politikon, we consider it essential to provide feedback to all authors. Okay, finally, how to review for Politikon? Well, just to mention that our database of reviewers consists of specialists in all subfields of political science and international relations. They hold degrees ranging from BAs to PhDs. Some of them are junior researchers, while others are consolidated scholars in their field. We are proud of having reviewers from around the world. So that will be all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rafael, for your insights. It has been actually a great experience for both of us to be in Politikon, and thank you, Max, for all the work that you did as editor-in-chief. It was amazing, and I think Rafael and Jocelyn do also an amazing job. So next, maybe we can listen to Nzube Chukuma and his insights. Welcome, Nzube.
Right, thank you very much. I think let me pick from where Rafael said, trying to say, when he said that Politikon has reviewers around the world. I'm Chukuma Nzube, and the editorial assistant for Africa, which is, should I say, when he talks about reviewers from all around the world. And looking at it in terms of seeing my own contributions, looking at it from the professional and personal developments of an editorial assistant, I think I can look at it from two categories in terms of one, as an editorial assistant, how it has to do with individuals trying to develop personally and professionally. Looking at it from first is the fast checking. Sometimes I could remember when Max would send a paper for me to review, he would tell me, try to verify those facts. And at the point in time, while looking at the manuscripts, I can, when an author made a particular statement, I was like, did he actually say this? So I'll open my slides, my Google, try to verify those facts. And sometimes I'll return the facts and he will like, okay, fine, this is where you need to do it. It helps you to verify facts because definitely you are into the academic environment. You mustn't know, you only learn from one or two authors when they send in their publication. Trying to verify facts, you can check those facts and see how suitable those facts suit in within the context of what the individual is trying to dish out to the public. And that is one thing with Politikon. As also he rightly said, we don't actually reject publication like manuscripts. You give reasons why a particular argument or a particular logic of an author should be in these particular perspectives. So when you send back such manuscripts to the author, he gain an insight. Like some publications, some journal firm, when they just look at the publication, if it doesn't suit their own, they reject it without, they'll just tell you that we don't think it's suitable. But what we'll do is that we'll give reasons for every aspect of any form of rejection or any form of corrections. And that enables, should I say, the young researcher, the early scholar, for him to develop, picking from, should I say, genuine insight from the editorial teams. And that is useful so far. I could remember there was a publication, right, that was on state capture in South Africa. As you can see today now, South Africa is facing, it has been splitted under state capture when Zuma was asked to go to jail. And the author, it was a book reviewed, the author was trying to give us an insight on what actually is happening in terms of this, the nature of state capture in South Africa. And should I say I was fortunate, let me use the word fortunate, to have reviewed that manuscript. And it gave me an insight, even though it's the concept of state capture, when it was brought into the Nigerian scenario, it became a different issue entirely. But the author was able to, looking at the book review, was able to bring more insight on what we needed to learn. Secondly, also look at the proofreading aspect of it and editing. When you proofread and edit, professionally and personally, you tend to learn in terms of certain structure, while on the way individuals write. Individuals have different writing styles. And when you proofread and edit, you're able to understand, okay, this is a particular writing style this individual is trying to adopt using his own methodology. I think it also helps individuals to do that. Then on the other side, for me, I think what Politikon has done so far is offering opportunity to young scholars. I could remember I never had an opportunity, as I said yesterday, I never had an opportunity to have seen a journal where you send in a manuscript, the correction will be given to you based on the knowledge expertise, or rather the expertise of those who did that. And you can see from logic, from the corrections, within you as an author, you can say, okay, yes, I think this is a huge contribution to this journal. Then you probably infer the corrections and probably return back to the journal firm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nzube, for your insights. It's actually very interesting what you pose here. So next, we have Andressa Vieira. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. So I'm gonna talk about two topics. I'm gonna talk a little bit about being editorial assistant, not that much because Nzube have already talked a little bit about some topics I had. And then I'm gonna present the special project of Politikon, of the webinars. So first, regarding the position of editorial assistant, I have been in this position for over 2 years now. And as mentioned before, from the side of the participating on Politikon, it's really interesting because we not only learn more about the academic publishing and all the processes that are behind it, but it's also a really good way to keep updated with people who are researching, so new methods, new topics. As Julia mentioned before, also we read a lot of different materials and papers despite our area of study. And also, as mentioned before, it's really good that we have this opportunity to not only proofread in terms of the structure and the format, but in Politikon, we also try to organize the manuscripts for people to proofread them who are familiar with the subject or are specialized in some area. This way we are able to also give some feedback and suggestions for the author. So even when authors get their manuscript rejected, they have some directions on what to change, even in structure or in content, and also ways to improve the paper. So this is beneficial for both sides, and especially for junior scholars. Some of them are just starting publishing in a journal, so it's really good to have this really complete and valuable feedback that we are able to give them. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the special project we did mostly last year with the webinars. So just to show. So this was the 2 webinars we held last year. This was something we had in mind for a while, but last year with the pandemic scenario, especially, all of these webinars are raising, and we also observed a lot of trends, especially when it comes to students starting to have all the classes online. So especially the first webinar that we had in June last year was on research and education in times of pandemic. So we tried to address these challenges that our students were facing, because for some of them who were doing even bachelor's, master's, or PhD, some of them were doing research, some of them had research techniques or methodologies that needed to, or at least at first needed to be done in person, such as interviews or focus groups or some different techniques. So we try to address this with these two areas. So first, we address the education aspect, and we have the root care from the Federica Web Learning Institute that also, as Julia mentioned before, IAPSS has a really good partnership with them. And to talk about the platform of IPSA MOOCs, and also giving the scholars a perspective on opportunities and other spaces for political science education in the online environment. And on the other hand, we had Professor Bojana Lobe from the University of Ljubljana to talk about the research side. So she was talking about digital technology as a social science data collection tool. So it was really valuable to have new insights, both on how to do and participate on other things regarding the education side, and also to learn another alternatives for the research that can be based in technology and digital environment. Later on in November, we had another webinar, which was in a partnership with the IAPSS Oceania and Politikon. So it was about publication and how to transform a thesis into a journal article. So we had the Professor Mark Beeson from the University of Western Australia. And he's also the founding editor of the journal Critical Studies of the Asia Pacific. So he mostly addressed how to get the most of a thesis or a research project and transform it into a high quality journal article, because junior scholars also have to face these challenges, because after they graduate, they may have a thesis or they may have a research project they developed during the studies, but then they are faced with this moment that they have to adjust it into a paper to submit for a journal. And there are some requirements and some style that it's also important to know a little bit more about. So we also had this. And I think that's my contribution. I'm gonna give the floor to the next participant. Thank you.
Thank you, Andresa. That's amazing. Well, last but not least, we have Max Stower, so that he can share with us all his knowledge. Welcome, Max.
Thank you so much, Anna, and it's been an honor and pleasure to be with you here, not just today, but also collaborate with some of you over several years, with some of you at least over the past few months, depending on when you joined the team, over the success of IAPSS Politikon, which I think really has advanced very significantly in the past period, and that is thanks to your contributions and your dedication, which of course is very challenging, particularly for the position of students, recent graduates, junior scholars who do not have, of course, any permanent position or any job security in a sense. Despite, and this is something we might be able to discuss a little bit later, the journal potentially improving some job prospects, and I think the initial study that Anna and Zube have conducted and that was presented in yesterday's roundtable that was mentioned indicates that there is a relationship between getting involved in the journal and getting this kind of tangible benefit of improving career prospects, including academic career prospects. Of course, this benefit is nothing direct or immediate, or is rarely at least a direct one. So in that sense, it does require a significant amount of dedication and commitment to choose to, in a way, volunteer for the journal rather than choose some other activities or focus on more tangible activities in terms of immediate benefits for the job market or for your profiles. So let me just try to cluster my comments, and I really don't think that I would have much wisdom to share or knowledge to share. But what I would like to do is perhaps to comment a little bit on the model that IAPSS Politikon has started to follow in these past few years, and that is the model of the Junior Academic Journal. And basically, these ideas have already been presented. I would just try to perhaps bring them a little bit together. Then a few remarks on the current performance of the journal and some of the performance indicators that we may be interested in and that we may need to follow. And finally, a few remarks on perhaps some areas that are still open for the future. Again, some of them have already been mentioned, and I hope that can provide a bridge towards the discussion, which I hope we can also have with our audience whom we have here today. So I would be very interested in any questions or thoughts, either through the chat or then later in the discussion from the audience. So to start with, the model of junior academic journal is nothing that is well established in the literature or in the sort of traditions of academic publishing, at least as far as we are aware of the existing scholarship on academic publishing, this kind of meta literature that discusses the practices existing in academic publishing. Usually there are two major journal models in terms of whether it's students or whether it's faculty who are being involved. So it is either a senior traditional journal where you have an editorial board composed of faculty members, usually professors or at least tenured scholars, and then you possibly have some editorial assistants who are doing more technical work, and they may be students or junior scholars, and possibly you may also have proofreaders in this position, though of course that is frequently covered by the publisher in case it is a commercial publisher or a publisher which has its own resources for proofreading. And I think this will be important in a little bit later when I discuss about the equalization prospects developed by the junior academic journal model. So that kind of senior journal is an established model of the journal. We have then the student journals, right? The journals that do not follow a very established model, but they are tied together by the fact that it is students who are sitting in the editorial board, and possibly students who are also involved as reviewers. This is not necessarily the case because we have seen also in yesterday's discussion, but also based on a simple review of these journals, we can see that there are journals, including in political science, that are student-based, but that invite faculty members, again, senior scholars, to actually conduct the peer review process instead of students, which is not necessarily the case for Politikon, where we of course do have some senior scholars on our list of reviewers, but we do not differentiate between senior and junior scholars when it comes to the eligibility to review manuscripts. These student journals differ also in terms of the extent of involvement of senior scholars beyond the review process. So usually there are some advisory boards that will be composed of senior scholars, but in some cases, as we have heard again in yesterday's session, these senior scholars might even take some veto powers or may potentially have a more significant involvement in other forms. Now, Politikon tries to develop this model of a junior academic journal, which really forms a bridge between these two. So it is not a senior journal in the traditional sense of the word, because of course we are in the editorial board, we are students or junior scholars, unlike of course in senior journals. But I think it would also not be any longer appropriate to call IAPSS Politikon a student journal, not because that title is in any way somehow decreasing its status or decreasing its profile. Student journals, as literature shows, are extremely important for many of the goals that also some of my predecessors have highlighted in terms of learning for those who are involved, in terms of gaining experience with first publishing. But because it simply doesn't fit the kind of composition of the journal as it stands now, because there are those involved in the editorial board who are no longer students. And of course, if we present the journal as a student journal, then this might create a little bit of a mismatch. Secondly, also the authors are not necessarily students. So when we look at student journals, the authors will almost always be students, or possibly there will be invited contributions from senior scholars. But those invited contributions frequently do not undergo a peer review process because they are invited contributions. So that creates the inequality where the senior scholars are not subject to the same peer review standards in the student journal than the junior scholars or the students, because they are considered to already have sort of mature pieces that do not necessarily need the peer review. So this is certainly not what the junior journal model stands for, because here in Politikon we do make sure that regardless of the profile of the author, the review standards are the same. And this is, of course, partially guaranteed at the moment now, also thanks to the triple blind peer review process, which just means that even the editorial board member who allocates the reviewers, the external reviewers to the manuscript, does not know the identity of the author. Therefore, they don't know whether it is a student, an undergraduate student, even we have some undergraduate students as authors, or whether it is a junior scholar or even a senior scholar. We even have some professors who are submitting full professors' manuscripts to the journal. So this kind of equality element is very important. And then I think also a number of you have highlighted the very important, what I would call perhaps from political philosophy, the right to justification, right? And that is that you as an author have a right to receive a justification in case your manuscript is rejected at any stage of the publication process. And I think this is particularly important when it comes to the first publishing experiences. I think Anna mentioned, and perhaps others as well, that we have many authors who have Politikon as their first serious academic journal and peer review experience. And so if that first experience is an experience of a one-liner rejection, that the piece is not suitable, or we just don't want to publish it, or similar, then certainly this right to justification, I would argue, is violated towards the authors, and in some cases it may even be detrimental for the further efforts of these authors, who are often students, junior scholars, to actually publish in the journal. And so this right to justification is something that I think the junior journal model provides. Of course, it may be provided very well in the senior journals, it may be provided very well in the student journals, but it's not a necessary component of either of these alternative models. I would also, perhaps as a third characteristic of this junior journal, highlight the importance of the equalization prospects, also when it comes to some of the preconditions for publishing. And this is certainly the language requirement. So of course, Politikon publishes in English. English is the lingua franca, but not everyone is a native speaker in English. And of course, the possibilities for everyone to learn English, in particular to learn academic English and to learn writing in English are not the same. So they will differ across jurisdictions, they will differ across universities, institutions, social backgrounds, and so on. And so if a particular journal sets a requirement to already have the manuscript proofread and in a professional language before it is submitted for the first time, and rejects manuscripts that do not really fulfill this requirement, although they might be quite promising in terms of the actual content and the actual research results, then an inequality emerges, because the authors are then forced to somehow find access to proofreading. And if their institution or some of the other opportunities, projects, grants that they may have access to do not provide this, then of course they are in a way in a lost position. They cannot really make use of the submission option to that particular journal unless perhaps they find some contacts, someone who can do that for them, or they invest from their own budget, which may not be available to them either. And so in the junior academic journal model, and this is where the editorial assistants, and I'm very glad that quite a few of them are here today, step in, that we do provide the proofreading for manuscripts, and we really set low standards as to the initial formal kind of language requirements for submission. Of course, these standards will certainly improve or are required to be improved later on in the process, but that is where the editorial assistants step in. Of course, some basic language requirements need to be met. I don't want to be too long, so let me just proceed to the second segment, which will discuss a little bit, as Anna already mentioned, the performance indicators for the journal. So here, just to highlight, this is the most recent statistics for the period that you can see on the screen, where you can see that IAPSS Politikon is a competitive journal, that there is a potentially high portion of desk rejections, which, if added to the rejections and to the withdrawals, that is when authors themselves decide that they do not want to continue with the assessment process of the journal, is quite high. And acceptance rate ultimately becomes pretty low, because it is only 16%, which still is of course higher than some of the top journals in the discipline. But I think we have heard yesterday from the International Political Science Review, the senior journal managed by IPSA, that their acceptance rate is around 15%. So we are around the same kind of level here. But of course, that means that all these manuscripts that are desk rejected or that are rejected receive feedback as well. So there is not the aim is that there is not a single manuscript that does not receive this kind of feedback. It's also important, I think, to highlight that there are few rejections after revise and resubmit. That is that very inconvenient point when the author already invested a lot of effort into revisions, substantive revisions of the manuscript, but then gets rejected in the second round of review. So we rarely have these instances unless the author withdraws the manuscript, which I think is a good sign. So if the manuscript already reaches that stage, if the authors invested effort, then it's already has a good chance to get published. Very briefly, here are some statistics just indicating the increase of interest also in the material that is getting published in the journal. CROSSREF statistics indicate how many times the authors or anyone who is following the journal is clicking on the DOI of the journal or of the particular issue or of the particular article. So here we can see a trend that, particularly when compared to the previous year, the previous reporting period has increased. And we can also see that when it comes to the new open journal system statistics, that there are also quite high indicators for access to the pages of the articles and the issues that are being published. So it's really around thousands and even higher in some instances. A single article even had 1,495 views in the last period. There is an interesting trend I observed for further discussion that most viewed publications are qualitative, interpretive, or works on political theory. So the quantitative articles that we get published or manuscripts are published less or viewed less frequently, which I found quite interesting, and I don't really have an explanation for that at this point. So very briefly, the future of the journal. Of course, this is in the very capable hands of the new editorial team, and in particular the new co-editors in chief, because the rest of the editorial team, I do hope, will remain involved. I would just like to mention that one important aspect concerns the journal's financing. We heard in yesterday's session that it is not possible to, in fact, run a journal without sufficient budget. It was just no time to mention there that IAPSS Politikon has almost no budget. We have a few hundred euros per year, which comes generously from the IAPSS budget to maintain the open journal system platform, but all the rest is volunteering work. So certainly this brings in a lot of challenges, but it also, I think, is very impressive in terms of the contribution of all of you and also others who are not here today, in terms of what can be achieved without actually any financial dimension. That being said, I think it is important to highlight that we will potentially benefit from further funding in the future, and we would need that funding if some of the activities and some of the projects are to be realized. And there is already a sponsorship prospectus available for the journal, which also some of the team members have been working on. And I think this is quite important to now disseminate, which brings also, of course, the connection to promotion, as Andressa has highlighted, as Julia has highlighted as well, that it is very important to promote the journal in very different platforms, avenues to spread the word, also to university departments, to faculties, to senior scholars, so that they are aware, and potentially this sponsorship project could make the journal sustainable from this perspective in the future. I have quite a few other points, but it turns out that I spent already more time than I had hoped. So I would stop here and I would open the floor, or leave Anna to open the floor for discussion, which I would very much look forward to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, since you all respected your time limit a lot, we still have a lot of time. So I will open the floor now for discussion and wait for your interventions.
Am I the only one to want to speak?
Hello.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Right. I really like your approach overall. I think it's great. I have a question for this this IPSA Congress. I submitted a paper which is actually multidisciplinary, and I heard in your presentation that you'd like multidisciplinary papers. My paper actually covers linguistic considerations, philosophical considerations, some social psychology considerations, a lot of empirical data, and political. Now, the political part of it is only the application of all my findings, because what I've done is I've taken a lot of findings and then applied them to the field of discrimination, which I think fits into the political side. But all of the rest is not really political. So what I do is I start from some linguistic and philosophical considerations which lead me to work out a way you can empirically establish which principles and values should be prioritized, and the ethical principles and values. And then I apply those to various areas of discrimination. Now, the question I have is that in terms of your finding reviewers who are specialized, it might be quite problematic. So I don't know whether you would take such a paper or consider such a paper on.
Does anyone prefer to answer that question?
Or if I'm not clear, to ask questions.
Okay, maybe we can have a round of questions and then we go to the answers. So we have participation from Blessmore Nikiti. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Hi.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, he talks about the linguistic aspect and trying to talk about the Politikon in his findings. I think for me, I don't know let's say the part of the analysis where we can see the critical discourse analysis. If, for instance, critical discourse analysis was employed, which I think has communication and also linguistic aspects, then also, should I say, an aspect of political science. If there is a marriage in terms of the language using critical discourse analysis in your linguistic approach, I think that may also contribute to political science itself and also to Politikon. So I don't know if that was, why maybe using the linguistic approach, there's need for you to, maybe you employed a critical discourse analysis aspect that looks at maybe the topic you are discussing. For instance, if someone is talking about, should I say, critical discourse using the communication aspect of it, if there is, should I say, a balance in the linguistic approach that plays in element of political, should I say, political dimension or public policy in terms of those linguistic topics you tend to pick, I think that may probably play a role in the area of the Politikon. Outside the findings, for me, using a critical discourse analysis, which sometimes in political science we employ, I think that may probably contribute, also play a role. That's just my own thinking and observation.
Thank you, Nzube. Blessmore is raising their hand. Would you like to participate?
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to ask my question. Unfortunately, I can't unmute my camera due to technical difficulties. So I hope you can hear me from my audio.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, how long does it take if I submit probably the paper that I presented in my panel in IPSA right now, and then I submit it to your journal in, like, say, September? How long does it take before I get a response from the editorial team, or how long does it take for the whole publication process? That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have another question? If not, probably some of you can answer Blessmore's question. If not, maybe I could help. So from the moment that you submit your paper to the journal, it goes through a first filter like the desk, and then that person decides if it has the elements, the right elements for it to go to the reviewers, for example. So once we receive, for example, the instructions of we as editors, I mean, I still feel like an editor, even though I'm not working as editor anymore, but I will speak like if I am one. So we receive the directions, like we have this paper, it is your specialty, let's say migration, for example. So could you please take a look at it, read it, and then try to find reviewers that are also specialists on this topic. And so this actually depends. I mean, the how long it takes, it depends on a series of elements, such as how long do the reviewers take in order to answer. Sometimes, like if we have a pool, like a database of reviewers, for example, and along with their specialties, and we go and look for them, and we try to get in touch with them and ask for their help. However, sometimes there are so many things to do that this communication takes a few days. And so it actually depends on this kind of communication. We getting in touch with the reviewers, then the reviewers, we give them a deadline so that they can do their work and provide their insights and give their feedback for the paper. And after we get these reviews, we wait for, like, for example, in my case, I would look for 3 or 4 reviewers per article. And once I get all these reviews, then I read them and analyze them, and then I get in touch with the author, depending on what the decision of the reviewers is. I mean, not the decision, but the recommendation. They usually recommend like publish with minor revisions, or they recommend that the paper should be revised almost entirely, or only aspects of them, or we call this revise and resubmit, or they can reject it. So it depends on how many opinions we get, and then we go to the authors and we let them know about the decision. If the paper actually has some potential or a lot of potential, we highly encourage them so that they can revise their manuscript and they can resubmit it. Because most of the times we have a very good idea and we receive recommendations of how to get it better, how to improve it. And so this is why we highly recommend the authors to revise and resubmit, and not to be discouraged by this, but to actually go through the whole process so that they can see their work published. So it might take probably, I would say, in average about 3 months, but it actually depends on this communication with the reviewers. Sometimes there are delays on their part, on our part, so it depends actually on that, but I would say that would be the average. So is there another question? If there's another question, maybe we still have some time. Maybe each of us wants to wrap up and give some final considerations. You agree? Maybe we can begin in the order that we presented. So maybe we can begin with Ms. Mellis, just to give a final consideration.
Sure. So I briefly presented ELA and ADV. These are the other 2 journals that are not presented enough in this panel, unfortunately. They're also, so ADV is an academic blog, and we are very much looking forward to receiving more commentaries, opinions and different kind of resource notes in that blog as well. And I'm taking this opportunity to promote that blog particularly. And for ELA, we are also specifically focusing on Latin American issues. So we are more focused on regional networks and trying to promote that journal specifically in 3 different languages. But these are quite similar to Politikon. Politikon was our very first journal, and then the other 2 followed it up and has similar aspects to it, following taking the example of Politikon. So I will leave the floor to Politikon editors now, and they will give more opinions about what's happening in the more improved journal of IAPSS.
Thank you, Melis. So since Julia is not here, maybe I will give some final thoughts. Yesterday we were talking about the reach of Politikon. Well, this is according to the investigation that we are currently working on with Nzube, which is about the impact of Politikon in young scholars' careers. And it actually called our attention that the journal has actually presence all around the world. We have like Europe, Asia, Africa, the whole continent, the American continent. We have, for example, 14% for this authors are from Turkey, and 9% are from the USA and Germany, and the rest of the countries have small percentages, like 5% come from Uzbekistan, Mexico, the Philippines, Italy, Ireland, India, Brazil. So it is good to know that the journal has this reach around the world. And I am particularly worried about students and young scholars to go through predatory journals, sometimes because of this pressure to publish all the time. And so I know some of your professors, so I would highly encourage professors to motivate the students, to try to educate them and guide them, like to show them the right road for publication, to show them different options of journals who are open to young scholars, and to motivate them to shoot for the highest. The worst that can happen is rejection, but you also learn from it, and not to be discouraged by rejection, because it's very normal, more normal than we think in academia, and we should probably learn how to deal with it and go on with our careers so that we can actually have some high quality research. I strongly agree with Max when he says that we should not call Politikon a student journal, because it has actually grown so much that we do not receive manuscripts from students. We receive manuscripts from PhDs and from postdocs and from professors, which talks highly on the quality of the research that we are publishing. And so in one final thought, it would be that with what it means for me as having been part of Politikon, it is that realizing what Politikon means for junior scholars. I believe that we are giving young scholars great options, not only with Politikon, but also with Encuentro Latinoamericano, and with the blogs, with the webinars. I mean, I believe what we are doing is good, and it's a long-term project that has grown so much, and that it still has so much space for growth. And well, I think that will be my contribution. So I will leave the space for Rafael for his final thoughts.
Anna, there's a question in the chat.
Oh, yes, let me see. It's from Satadru. Okay, hi, I have a question. I joined in a little late, so I don't know if this was discussed, but with each issue for the journals, are there themes or a list of topics on which you accept papers or articles? Well, maybe I can answer to this. So we have like 2 journals in IAPSS. One of them is Politikon and the other one is Encuentro Latinoamericano. We usually focus on politics, political science. However, we also receive papers or manuscripts like from international relations, for example, I myself major in international relations and on migration, which is a topic that it is less seen here, but it actually does publish on those topics because it relates to the point of view from political science or international relations, also sociology and some related topics. So my suggestion is that if you have your manuscript, maybe you can give it a try and send it out to Politikon or Encuentro Latinoamericano, which is the journal that focuses on issues of Latin America itself. So I'm not sure what your topic is about, but if you have a proposal, I highly encourage you to give it a try with Politikon or Encuentro Latinoamericano, which is actually resuming very soon their activities. So Rafael?
Yes, thank you very much, Anna. Well, I can conclude with some comment on what has been my greatest learning or experience in IAPSS Politikon, in this journal. Well, there have been many good experiences that I have had in my position as editor and also as deputy editor-in-chief. Being part of a journal like Politikon allows you to strengthen a set of skills that such as critical thinking, logical thinking, teamwork, and the ability to meet goals and objectives. Something that was mentioned yesterday in one of the papers presented in the panel, the role of students and junior scholars in academic publishing, that caught my attention, and that is true, is that that the value of humility is strengthened, and this value is necessary, I think, because in many contexts it is lacking, and I have the impression that this is accentuated in structurally heterogeneous contexts or countries, such as the one to which I belong. This value of humility on the campus of the academia, using the concepts of Pierre Bourdieu, the campus of the academia, is something that that almost does not exist in this in this context. So and I think that this has to do with the absence of growth opportunities and with the enormous competition in context of scarce resources. But yes, it is true, the need to constantly offer feedback to papers you are evaluating and to know new methodologies, new approaches, new theoretical frameworks. I think that makes you more humble. So it has been a fascinating experience to participate in this journal. So that's just a small comment on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael. Zube, maybe you want to give your final thoughts? Zube, can you listen to us? Maybe you could help us with your final thoughts on this. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I got disconnected, so that's why. I think part of, should I say, my final thought will be on how do we get the postgraduate students, the lecturers, mostly the graduate assistant, also, which are the young academia, to get involved. Partly from, should I say, the region I'm from in Africa, and also the region I am now, which is Asia, because I discover most times my conversation with my colleagues back home is that they are not familiar with this particular platform. And so I think I need to probably get in contact with the region based in terms of Africa, to see how we can get more of the young lecturers who are coming to the academics environment to key into this platform, to this flagship journal platform, because we really need the ideas to get involved. I think there was, in our last conference we did, IAPSS, the student conference we did, the presenter, who happens to be Professor Christopher Isika from South Africa, a Nigerian, happens to be a professor in South Africa, in the University of South Africa. He's trying to discuss, in a discussion on certain topics, I found that while he was talking about Africa, there were fewer questions from the audience in what he was saying about Africa. And in the chat, my observation was that fewer people understood, should I say, the academic environment of Africa and also what happens in Africa. There is a lesser literature coming from Africa itself to a wider, should I say, to a global audience. So we need young, should I say, young lecturers from that environment to key into a platform that has a global reach. So individuals, other students, other audience can tap from the knowledge of what they're trying to pass across. Because at the end of the discussion, it was I myself and one other student from Ghana that was just asking me questions. And we have a larger audience outside Africa. So to the point that I was trying to ask if the knowledge, the understanding of what happens in Africa, the issues in Africa, were not known to those students. And I had a colleague who is from Turkey who said they never taught in their universities in Turkey, there is hardly anything on Africa itself. So it's an opportunity, the platform becomes an opportunity for those lecturers in their environments to send in articles, publication, ideas to a global platform that had students and also that also had, lecturers to key in and to know what is happening from Africa so they can be able to contribute in a scenario of that nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Nzube. Maybe Andressa can give us her final thoughts.
Okay, so for my final considerations, I actually want to tie a little bit of what Anna said and the question of Mr. Keith about the submission of the paper. So we're really encouraged. From what I understood, your research has a little bit of social psychology. So I was going to say that also to encourage you to submit, because as editorial assistant, of course, it's always nice to read some different and innovative works and how other areas are more and more able to relate to the political science and to the social studies. And for example, I study political psychology, so I work with public behavior and public opinion. So it will be a pleasure to read your manuscript if it gets to us. So just to highlight again how interesting is, even though if the manuscript in any way gets rejected, the feedback aspect of our journal is really interesting for the authors, and the publication also, because when I started my contact with IAPSS back in 2018, I published a paper in the Encuentro Latinoamericano after the IAPSS Congress. And this is actually my paper who has the most visibility of all my publications. So as Max showed the data, it's really beneficial to publish in our journals. And also if someone has any question again, I'm up for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andressa. So finally we have Max.
Thank you very much, Anna and everyone. This has been great. I learned from your insights, and it's been very energizing to also hear about the diverse motivations and perhaps the aspects that you are highlighting that really still haven't been under consideration, I think, really properly in the journal. And certainly the diversity aspect is one of them. And I think we have made progress also if we are to do some quantitative indicators which we haven't had the chance to do yet, but the data are there, and Anna and Zuber have done a little bit already in their paper, but there is a lot to improve on that front for sure. Certainly, I very much appreciate what Raphael highlighted in reference to Pierre Bourdieu, but also in general the concept of humility and how it's tied to humanity, and how those two are tied to the role of academic journals and the role of academic publishing, because I don't think this is really highlighted enough in that very sort of technical process where really we are following rankings, we are following impact factors for some other criteria for the journal, and we are not really looking at the actual value that emerges from the process of experience of the publishing. We are only looking at the output of the publication in the end. Yeah, I mean, I could mention a lot of aspects that haven't been covered yet, but perhaps I would just prompt some areas for further consideration. And one of them certainly pertains to the relationship between IAPSS publications, and this is what Melis has been discussing in her contribution. There is IAPSS Politikon, but of course there is also Encuentro Latinoamericano, and there is the blog. And there are certainly many areas of collaboration that could emerge between these publications, having in mind, for example, the possibility for the authors of published manuscripts to have short blog posts that would summarize their manuscript on a different view. This is something that has been floating around already for a while. Similarly, the potential of Encuentro is there in terms of publishing in Spanish and in Portuguese. So perhaps if there is a prominent and well-received article published in Politikon on Latin America in English, then a translation could be considered for Encuentro Latinoamericano into Spanish and Portuguese. These are just some examples, which we of course would need to also discuss with the team members who could not be there here today for the Encuentro journal and a different view. But that's just one internal way how to perhaps strengthen also the portfolio that is available within IAPSS. And then in terms of the quality indicator, so I do think that this pertains to the question on how long it takes to get published. That unfortunately here we do not really differ from senior journals in that it takes long to get published in the journal, but it doesn't. There is just no way around that, precisely because of the reasons that were mentioned by Anna and others on the search for reviewers, on the insurance that whatever we published is something that, of course, the editorial team can stand behind, but also is something that the author can be really proud of. And I think in all of these contributions that have been published in Politikon, the authors themselves can be proud of their achievement of these contributions, and that is often because of the revision and the assessment process. So that is something we certainly intend to provide for the experience of the authors. And perhaps on a concluding note, I would just read out or paraphrase a few segments from some of the responses that we received from our author satisfaction survey, which is a survey that we are currently sending to all authors of published manuscripts, but also authors of manuscripts that were rejected. So not the desk rejection stage, because that's a very brief experience in the journal. Usually it's just one email with the feedback, but a substantive feedback, as I mentioned. However, all authors who proceed to the main assessment are contacted sooner or later, depending on availabilities with this survey. And we are receiving feedback, which of course has some suggestions for improvement, but is generally very, very positive. And for example, one respondent in this survey said the review process has been among the most rewarding experiences I have ever had in publishing. All comments and criticisms I received were very, very constructive, which is very motivating. They are also highly professional and strict in terms of making sure that the article is of high academic quality. So this comes from someone who has actually gone through that process of the submission and assessment process in the journal. Others also highlight this benefit of the review process, which I think is something that certainly is a major strength of the journal and needs to be retained. And perhaps part of that strength, and that may respond to that comment on, if there is an article that perhaps doesn't seem to fit that well within political science, we do have generalist reviewers. That means that we are interested in also what a reviewer who might not be a close, narrow specialist on this very specific subfield that the manuscript may be on thinks about the particular manuscript. And this follows what senior generalist journals have also implemented in terms of sometimes there being one reviewer who is really a specialist on the narrow field, and then there being another reviewer who is not necessarily a specialist on the narrow field, but perhaps on a more broader set of questions. And these questions are then very important still, because we want to make sure that the manuscript that is published is not just read by perhaps 3 other scholars who are working in that extremely narrow field over the world, but is read widely by also others who are interested perhaps in different issues, but can tie that interest to the manuscript. And really, as a last note, I really find perhaps most motivating, or among the most motivating, feedback or a piece of feedback that was received from actually an author. This was received through an email. That's why I know, because the survey is anonymous, from an author who got rejected. Actually desk rejected even for the journal, and this was one of those perhaps less fortunate cases where the disk rejection has been repeated. So we do allow, even if there is a disk rejection, we do allow that the author can submit again a new version of the manuscript, which is not something that all journals allow. Some journals just say, if it is disk rejected, you can't submit that manuscript again. You may submit a completely different manuscript, but you can't submit that manuscript again, because then you would basically use the resources of the journal again. So we don't do that. We allow the authors to submit again. But sometimes it does happen that even if they submit again and they work on the manuscript based on the feedback they received with the desk rejection before, the improvement is not substantial enough in order to merit the procession of the manuscript into the main assessment process. And so those are personally for me quite unfortunate cases, because there it's clear that the author is trying to advance, is trying to progress with the manuscript, but sometimes it's just perhaps because of the disadvantages that the particular author has been facing in terms of their education, in terms of the access to resources. Perhaps the language is really at a level which doesn't really allow to proceed with the manuscript. Then it gets desk rejected again and again. But we always try to provide this feedback repeatedly, even to the author. And we had very few cases where actually this desk rejection has been more than 2 times. But this was one of those cases, and yet the author has replied that I appreciate your evaluations, and I learned from it more than I learned in 1 semester in college, right? So this was one author who apparently, of course, was a student, but clearly thought that it is more beneficial to have 1 experience with submitting to Politikon than spend 1 semester in college, which of course may not be true for all colleges, but still I think tells quite a lot about the potential of Politikon to really make a difference for students starting from undergraduate level, but also towards scholars in different positions, and not just as authors, but also as reviewers and ultimately as editorial board members. And I wanted to also use, or perhaps abuse, the opportunity to know that after several years, actually, we for the first time again have a direct call for editorial board members, which we have sort of abandoned because we adopted a model where we have calls for editorial assistants, and we welcome new editorial assistants. And after some experience with them, and also them, getting an experience with the journal, having an opportunity to sign up to apply and get into the editorial board. But because of a significant increase in the number of manuscripts that we have recently received, also tied to 1 special issue project, we also have special issue projects. We have opened this call for editorial board members directly at this point. Now, we sometimes may consider the applicant then as editorial assistant, provided that the profile is promising but doesn't yet meet the requirements for editorial board members. However, it is an open call that currently is available, and so we definitely hope to receive a lot of applications in this process and to enlarge the team, because as also Raphael has highlighted, teamwork is an essential criterion and condition for success of IAPSS, Politikon, and of any academic journal ultimately. And so we do need the team to be strong, to also be large enough to be able to practically manage the challenges and the responsibilities in the journal. So again, this is not just a session on the possibilities to write for the IAPSS publications, but also on the possibilities to get involved as reviewers in the case of the journals, but also ultimately as members of the editorial board, as those who will shape the future of the journals and of this portfolio. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much to everyone for being here. So it has been for me a pleasure not only to be part of this team, but also to have the opportunity to share this talk. So it's been a pleasure to listen to everyone, their experiences, their points of view with respect to the ways they have been involved in either of our projects, such as Politikon or Encuentro Latinoamericano or the blogs. And also to our participants, thank you very much for joining. We hope that this was very informative for you and that you got encouraged to publish with us and also to participate, to get involved with IAPSS and with one of our journals. So thank you so much for being here, and I wish you a nice evening or a good day or a good night. It depends on wherever you are. So thank you again.
Thank you. I'm impressed.
Bye.
Bye.